أعوذ بالله من شر الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد, respected scholars, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the first half of our nights in محرم, we gained a beautiful idea of the role models and how to differentiate a role model and the appearance of a role model. Inshallah, I'd like tonight to look at how we are to conduct ourselves, how to go about in dialogue, how to go about in debating the idea and the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt. How is it that through our ethics and through our tongue we can bring people towards the idea and the school of Ahlul Bayt? And I'd like to look at this on a number of stages. The first, in the idea of debate and dialogue, what is the main goal when debating with someone or engaging in dialogue? Number two, what are the different people when you're associating yourself and you're having a debate? Are there different types of people? Should you or should you not debate everyone? And finally, I'd like to look at the idea of bringing forth people to the school of Ahlul Bayt without even using your tongue. Inshallah, we'll start our topic tonight, but before it, allowed salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When engaging in dialogue, someone may come forth and ask, why is it that you are engaging in the first place? Now, the idea put forth when engaging in the idea to bring forth people or to show people the idea and the characteristics of Ahlul Bayt is number one, not to go there and make him or her a follower of Ahlul Bayt. Not to make them a follower, rather what? The idea when debating or when having dialogue is to show them who Ahlul Bayt are. In any dialogue, in any dispute, it's the idea, in Latin terminology, is to see with the other person's lens. So if you're wearing glasses, what you are seeing, that's what you try and do to the other person, so that he may be in your shoes, in the figure of speech. So the idea is to open their mind and to show them what kind of characters we have in our religion. Now, someone may come forth and ask, he says, can we have dialogue with everyone? Luqman has a beautiful story with his son. He says, come with me, I want to show you the different types of people. So they take their donkey and they go in the market. He says, this, my son, is the first type of people. He walks with his son and the donkey is by their side. And people start to say, what? He says, look at Luqman as his son. They have a donkey, yet they have not used it. They have not utilized it. He says, those, my son, are the first type of people. He walks, he puts his son on the donkey and he walks in the market. Another group of people would say, what? Would say, look at Luqman and look at his son. His son has no respect for his father. He sits on the donkey while his father walks beside him. He says, look, my son, those are the second type of people. He keeps walking in the marketplace, he takes his son off, he goes and rides the donkey. And the people would say, what? Would say, look at the oppressive father. He sits on the donkey while his young son walks beside him. And the fourth type of people, he tries to show his son, he says, come with me, son, let's both sit on the donkey. And when they're in the marketplace, the people would say, what? And they say, poor donkey. But both of them are sitting on him. He says, my son, look at the 4 different types of people. Giving us an idea of what? That when debating and we're having dialogue, not only verbally, brothers and sisters, when you are engaging in any action in your life, you are representing the school of Ahlul Bayt. When you are in school, when you are in the workforce, when you are at universities, every action should be a reflection of what Ahlul Bayt teach us. Now, many people come forth and they ask me before tonight, they say, Sayyid, what if I am offered a handshake? And it's very common, very, very common, in the workforce or at university or at school, that a person from the other gender would come forth and want to get your hand in a handshake as a kind gesture. Now, as we know in the school of Ahlul Bayt in Islam, touching of the other gender that is not mahram is forbidden. Now he says, how is it that I can go about this? There was a beautiful story. Let's say in Hadi Mudarrisi, I talked to him about this, and he says, I was giving a lecture in a European country. He says, I gave a long lecture about female rights. About female rights. She says, one of the journalists was so blown away, she wanted to meet me. So she comes forth, and she brings her hand. And the Saint says, well, I can't touch you, I'm sorry. She says, now you've just talked about feminism and the role of female in society, and you talked so greatly about the female figure, yet you do not shake my hand. He says, what? He says, I'd like to look at it from a different perspective. She says, what do you mean? He says, look at the Queen. He says, okay. She says, can any person come forth and touch the Queen or shake her hand? She says, no. Then she says, who can shake this Queen's hand? And she says, only those that are close to her. And the Sayyid goes, what? He says, likewise is the female in Islam. To us, she is of the utmost importance. And not anyone can come forth and touch her unless he or she is mahram. So technically, he's trying to give us a metaphor that our women are like queens. They are of the utmost importance. Their hijab and the idea of hijab is important. Now going back in the idea of dialogue, another thing we have to keep in mind is when debating, know who you're debating. If Imam Ali comes forth and states, he says, I have never debated an ignorant fool except lost. I have never debated an ignorant fool except lost. And the idea that what? If you know these extremists and people that have a particular idea of the school of Ahlul Bayt come forth and attack it, and you try day and night to change their mindset, you will not be able to. Why? Because they are stubborn, ignorant, and are fools. If they do not want to take the events that you take place and tell them about, such as Ghadir Khom, the ahadith that you bring forth, the logic of Islam and the logic of the school of Ahlul Bayt, if they do not want to encompass that in their head, then do not bother debating them. He says, on the contrary, I have never debated a rational person except one. Because they understand when someone is talking to them. They have the idea of free thinkers. They do not let any Tom, Dick and Harry guide the way they think. They think by themselves. They use what God gave them, the power of logic and intellect. He says, I have never spoken or debated a rational person except one. On the second level, it shows us what? That know who you are debating. Because not everyone can understand what you are about to say. When the Imams and the Prophets talk to people, they give, for the same question, to two different people, two different answers. Why? Because it says, نُحَدِّثُ النَّاسَ عَلَىٰ قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ. Everyone has a different dimension through which they can comprehend a particular story, that they can comprehend a particular hadith. So we tell them as much as they can handle. As much as they can handle. Know who you are talking to and know how to talk to them, brothers and sisters. In the famous debate that took place in the court of Abbasid court, between Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and one of the great personalities of the four schools of thought. He studied 2 years under Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And you know him very well. He has a famous statement saying, لَوْلَا السَّنَتَانِ لَهَلَكَ النُّعْمَانِ. 2 years. Abu Hanifa would not know anything. He says, I would have perished if it was not for those 2 years I studied under Ja'far al-Sadiq. He comes and in the court they have a debate amongst themselves. It's a long debate. I just want to mention two. Two of the questions that came between Imam al-Sadiq and Abu Hanifa. Imam al-Sadiq looks at him. He says, who gave you the permission to give jurisprudential arguments? Why? And who gave you the authority? He says, I am learned now. I have given myself authority. I have reached that rank. He says, not a problem. What is your strength out of all this fiqh and tarikh? You have history, you have jurisprudence, you have all these ideas that come into play when giving a fatwa. And he says, what's your strongest area? What's the strongest area you find yourself in? He says, my strongest area is tahara and najasa, purification and impure substances. He says, then tell me, what's the answer to this question? He says, what's more impure, urine or semen? So Abu Hanifa is thinking to himself, and he says, well, I think that urine is much more impure than semen. So the Imam looks at him. Notice how the Imam comes forth. He did not give him an answer. Rather, he let him stumble upon his own words, making him think twice about what he said. He said, tell me, if urine is more impure, why is it that you only wash the particular area, whereas when semen is produced, you wash a whole body? It's a whole ghusl takes place. Tell me, answer this question. He says, no, this is not my strong point. This is not my strong point. He says, what is your strong point? Let me debate you there. He says, my strong point is about the pillars of Islam. Salah, Sawm, etc. He says, tell me what's more important in the religion of Islam. Is it Salah or is it Siyam? Abu Hanifa is thinking to himself, is it Salah, Siyam? He says, Salah. Salah is much more important than Siyam. Look how the Imam answers. He says, if this is the case, if Salah is much more important, tell me why is it that the females do not re-pray those prayers that they were not able to pray, whereas when it comes to fasting, they have to redo their fast? Why is it? So he's thinking to himself again. It's a long debate, brothers and sisters. Read it. Read that debate and look at the intellect. Look how much you look into the life of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and think to yourself, look at this figure and look at the other four schools of Islam and how they learnt from this teacher. Because that's the argument that takes place. They say the Ja'fari school we do not take from. It's not the school of thought. Then ask them this question. All the four different schools of thought who was their teacher? If you want to go to someone, do you go to the students or do you go to the teacher? That's the question that arises. Giving us the idea of what? How to go about in your debates. You don't necessarily want to attack them with all the information and guidelines, and this is why I'm correct. Look at it and say to them, say, this is what the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt brought us to. This is what knowledge the Imams have taught us. And by that, if they have logic and intellect, they understand where God's knowledge lay, where the Asma lays, brothers and sisters. And they teach us how? By their interactions with other people. As another example, in the courtroom of the Abbasid Khalifa of Imam Allah's time, Al-Ma'mun. In Al-Ma'mun's time, he gathers the greatest scholars of the time, from Christianity, from Judaism, even from atheism. He brings them to the courtroom. He says, Yabna Rasulillah, I want to see who's the most knowledgeable amongst this ummah. And he brings forth, it's called the Munadharah. He brings all these great scholars, grand scholars of the time, and they debate. Our ninth Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa. What a beautiful debate. And look at the character of the Imam and how he went in dialogue. The Christian comes forth and he asks the Imam. He says, why do you say that your prophet is the greatest prophet? Why do you say? Look at what the Imam replies. He could have chosen anything. Look at how he replies. Because you have to know who you are debating. You have to know who you're debating. He knows he's a Christian. He knows his morals. He knows his ethics, and he knows what he stands for. He says, our prophet is greater than Jesus, son of Mary, because he prayed more. Our prophet prayed more. In which the reply was what? The reply was, how dare you say someone prayed more than our Lord Jesus? The reply of the Christian. In which the Imam said, if you say, O Christian, if you say that he is your Lord, can you tell me who he was prostrating to? Can you tell me, if you say that he is God, who was he prostrating to? Notice, put him, as we say, in a corner. Can't come out. In the way that he approached it. In dialogue. Amazing. And the beautiful narration when he was going against the atheist pointed, because Tawheed is one of the hardest and most philosophical areas that we discuss. And now this is in the door of Tawheed. He asked the atheist, he says, is Allah in us? Or are we in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? هل الخالق في الخلق أم الخلق في الخالق? The atheist asks Imam. It's a beautiful question. When discussing Tawheed, it's a beautiful question. The Imam, look at what he replies. He says, tell me of the mirror. Tell me about the mirror. Is the mirror in you or are you in the mirror? Look at that beautiful example, brothers and sisters. When he says, is God in us or are we in God? He gives him the example of the mirror. He says, is Allah in us now or are we in Allah? He says, do you see yourself in the mirror? Can you see the difference? Are you in the mirror or the mirror is in you? He says, I'm in the mirror. He says, that's not a valid reply. Nor are you in the mirror. Nor is the mirror in you. You merely see a reflection of the magnanimous nature of you in the mirror. He says, likewise is Bani Adam. He says, you merely see Allah's reflections on earth. You merely see Allah's reflections on earth. And who is Allah's reflections on earth? Who is Allah's reflections on earth? Who encompass all the good names of Allah, who encompasses the attributes that Allah tried to show us about His greatness in the way they move, they act, and they have dialogue. Think about it, brothers and sisters. And we look at figures that learn from the Imams, and look at what status they have amongst people. If someone such as Mahatma Gandhi, famously known by Gandhi, starts a revolution in India, and when he's asked, he says, who gave you the idea of this revolution? He said, I learned from Hussein how to achieve victory whilst being oppressed. I learned from Imam who? From Imam Hussein. This man is not even Muslim. This man is not even Muslim, yet he understands the humanitarian ideas that the Imam stood for and the Ahlul Bayt. Now look what kind of people the Imams and Ahlul Bayt produce as being close to them. If you learn from the Imams and you learn from Ahlul Bayt, look at what you can become. We look at an example of Fadlah. Look at the example of Fadlah. Fadlah used to serve the household of Fatima al-Zahra. Fatima al-Zahra would have her in the house. She would distribute the chores equally between her and Fadlah. She learnt everything from Fadlah. A man says, I saw a lady. This is Fadlah, brothers and sisters. Look at how close you can get to the Imams and go in their footsteps. Look at what you can become if you follow in their footsteps. He says, I saw a lady in the deserts. I came to that lady. And I said, oh lady, how are you? Where are you from? The lady, he said, replied in the Quran, chapter 43, verse 89, وَقُلْ سَلَامٌ فَسَوْفَ يَعْلَمُونَ. He said, I'm thinking to myself, she's replying from the Quran, maybe it's a one-off. So I asked her, I said, Salaamu Alaikum, are you lost, O lady? Are you lost? She replies with chapter 37, verse 39. وَمَنْ يَهْدِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ مُضِلٍّ. And whoever Allah guides, no one can misguide or divert. So he's thinking to himself, this lady is replying from the Holy Quran. He's asking her, are you from mankind? Are you human or are you jinn? He's confused because she's replying from the Holy Quran. What does she reply with? Chapter 7, verse 31. Ya bani Adam, it says, oh mankind. Oh mankind. So it says, you're a human, not a problem. He says, where do you come from, O lady? Where do you come from? She looks at him and she narrates chapter 41, verse 44. From a far place. I come from a far place. He says, oh lady, where is it that you are headed? Where is it that you are headed? She replies with chapter 3, verse 97. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ. I'm going to Mecca. I'm going for pilgrimage. I'm going to Mecca. He said, is that your caravan in front of you? Why is it that you do not speed up and catch that caravan quickly? She replies with chapter 2, verse 286. Saying what? Saying that Allah does not burden a soul more than it can handle. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. So he's looking at her, saying, what an amazing lady. He was riding a camel. He looks at her, he says, why do you not ride this camel with me? Hop on! And we will run towards this caravan. Maybe you know some people there. What does she reply with? Chapter 21, verse 22. وَلَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمْ آلِهَةً غير الله لفسدتا. And if there was gods other than Allah, there would be corruption in the skies and on the earth. وَلَوْ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةً غَيْرَ اللَّهِ لَفَسَدَتَا. There would be corruption. So he's thinking to himself, this lady, she's not mahram to me, obviously she would not get on the camel. So he gets off the camel and says, lady, you get up. You get up on the camel, not a problem. Not a problem. She replies with verse what? It was chapter 43 verse 13. Subhanalladhi sakhara lana hada. Subhanalladhi sakhara lana hada. The whole conversation, glory to the Lord that has given us this. The whole conversation between Fadda and the man took place in Quran. This is to give you an example of who the people turn out to be that are close with the Imams and Ahlul Bayt. This was a woman that served the household of Ahlul Bayt. Look what kind of woman she turned out to be. And it reminds me of the example I gave 2 nights ago, when I mentioned Imam Ali alayhi salam with Fatima al-Zahra. Because what we have to learn, brothers and sisters, is how we can be, as Imam al-Sadiq states, du'atun bighayri alsinatina. You have to be role models for the religion of Islam without the use of your tongues. How? By the way you move, by the way you act, by the way you smile. Yes, by the way you smile at people, the way you conduct yourself, the way your character is. You should not lie, you should not cheat, you should be the epitome of what is known to be good in this universe. Because that is what the footsteps of Ahlul Bayt teach us. When looking at Ali ibn Abi Talib, you see, I want to be as knowledgeable as Ali, as brave as Ali, as loyal as Ali ibn Abi Talib. You look at Imam Hussein, you say, I want to sacrifice like Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You look at Imam Hassan, he says, I want to have his patience. You look at each and every person in Ahlul Bayt and you can take from their lives. You look at Fatima, and you look at Zainab and you say, I want to have the hijab and uphold the hijab like Fatima and like Zainab alayhi salam. You learn from each and every figure of Ahlul Bayt. That's why when I say debate and dialogue, you do it at stages even without using your tongues, brothers and sisters. Just by your conduct and your morality. You bring people towards the religion of Islam. Bring forth people to the school of Ahlul Bayt. Now when Imam Ali alayhi salam is talking to Fatima al-Zahra, we mentioned that he would never say, Ya Fatima. He would also say what? He would always say, Ya Binta Rasulillah. When she would look at him, she would say, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Do you know who else on the 10th of Muharram never called his brother by Ya Akhi? Who else? Never once in his life, never once Abu Fadl al-Abbas called Imam al-Hussein Ya Akhi. Never. Did he mention, oh brother? Never once did he mention, oh brother. Always my master. My master, Abu Abdullah. Until that night, until that day on the 10th of Muharram. Narrations tell us that the Imam left after Abu Fadl al-Abbas was struck. He leaves the tent and he goes towards Abu Fadl al-Abbas. And on the way he stops and he bends down and he gathers something from the ground. He goes up again and then he walks and walks and then he stops. And then he sits again and then he cries and cries and then he gets up again. After he held both of the hands of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. both the hands of Aba Fadl al-Abbas. He gets to Aba Fadl al-Abbas. After he says, Ya Akhi, oh brother, come to my aid. He takes him and puts him on his lap. Aba Fadl al-Abbas says, oh you, I tell you by who you worship, do not kill me until my brother comes near to me. Let me say my final goodbyes to my brother Hussein. He says, oh Aba Fadl al-Abbas, I am Hussein. He takes his head off his lap onto the dirt of Karbala, and Imam Hussein takes his head and puts it back into his lap. And again Aba Fadl al-Abbas takes his head off, puts it on the dirt. He says, Aba Fadl al-Abbas, why is it that you take your head off my lap? Why is it? He wipes the blood off his eyes because he's been struck with an arrow. He could not see He could not see Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He says, brother al-Hussein. He says, now my head is in your lap. Can you tell me in a few moments, where is your head going to be? Can you tell me in a few moments? That's the characters that Ahlul Bayt produce, brothers and sisters. This is Aba Fadl al-Abbas. That's Aba Fadl al-Abbas. Let's learn from his character. Amongst you and amongst us are people that have not even talked to their brothers and sisters amongst petty things. Remember this. Remember Aba Fadl al-Abbas and the respect he had for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Remember this, brothers and sisters. Let's learn from the examples given on the 10th of Muharram. Let's learn from the examples given from Ahlul Bayt's time. We pray to Allah on an ending note. We pray to Allah to resurrect us amongst them, and amongst Muhammad and Al Muhammad. We pray to Allah that He resurrects us amongst Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib. We pray to Allah to make us one of the soldiers of Imam Sahib al-Asr wal Zaman. And we pray to Allah, we have a sick child. Inshallah, we can read him a dua 10 times. أمن يجيب المضطر يا brothers and sisters. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 Ya Allah. On an ending note, brothers and sisters, we have 4 final nights, inshallah. We make the most of them. We pray to Allah on an ending note with a Fatiha. But before it, 3 of your loudest salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.